Kenjaku versus Teen Gojo. After Kenjaku's numerous losses to previous Six Eyes user, he's decided to face against the hidden inventory Gojo and see how far he would come against. We will be using the obviously form against Toji, which was awakened, and we'll do brief scaling of both forms of Gojo and see how Kenjaku would do against the Honored One. I have my man Kaio, he makes a lot of great JJK content, so make sure to go check out all his links down below. And we'll first start off with some Gojo scaling, so I'll let my man Kaio take this. And how would you scale both forms of Gojo?
See, this is a very tricky topic and also a very sensitive one for certain fan bases, because Teen Gojo, at least the pre-awakened version, does scale insanely highly because he was already famous, though that's more of a fame claim. But at the very least, I know there's the whole line of him and Geto being equals and they're both considered the strongest, though I don't actually think that's true.
Caps. Major caps.
Because A, Yuki exists. Yeah. B, specifically with Toji, when we actually see several times when he's planning, he specifically wanks Gojo to oblivion, and he clarifies, I think like maybe 3 or 4 times specifically, it's Gojo. Gojo is the only issue in the way of the plans. It's only Gojo. And we need to wear, and I quote, we need to wear Gojo down before we assassinate them. And there's even a line with the broker, right? Where he says, can you even beat this version of Gojo? And Toji actually dodges the question. He says, he's just quiet, and he says, if we want to assassinate Rico, Gojo must be worn down. And of course, that, just to say, that he does scale above Teen Geto as well. I do think Teen Geto and Gojo are relative. I think there's like a 2-tier gap. So I'm not saying it's a massive gap. So they can fight and they can scuffle. And of course, once he awakens, it's a several tier gap where it's not even close. But that's just kind of my perspective on it. I know a lot of people think Teen Geto is very powerful. So do I. I think he's one of the strongest grade ones in history at that point. But just wanted to throw that out there since, there are people who think Teen Geto is on Gojo's level, even though, it's just, it's major cap. But
listen, to put it into reference, I think Teen Geto is on current Megami's level. So that's just how I feel about the difference between Geto and Gojo in Hidden Inventory.
I mean, I think it'd be close. I'm not going to get this into a Teen Geto versus Megami video, but I think Teen Geto is like a whole tier above any grade 1, that we've seen. Bar Higuruma, but that's only because of the domain.
I got Nobito cooking Geto. I got him cooking.
Really? Yeah. I got Geto smoking. That would be tough. Can't lie, a tough fight, but I got him winning that.
Say no more.
But
that gives
sorry, continue. Last point I'll just say for Teen Geto. I don't want to Gojo. Sorry, I don't want to make this a whole thing. But just to clarify, Toji specifically said several times he needs to wear down Gojo before he fights him, because he does hype up Gojo literally as a legendary figure of the Gojo clan. And he's also, aware that he's not awakened, since he knows the difference between awakened and unawakened member of the Gojo clan, or someone of the Six Eyes Limitless, which is why once he sees Gojo awakens, he says, oh, he's an awakened Six Eyes Limitless user. He's actually the one who coined that term, so yeah, he knows the difference between the two. And also, he made a several-day plan to have Gojo physically nerfed, right, to the point where he's sweating even from just standing, right, he's just sweating profusely, he hasn't slept in 3 days, mentally nerfed that he's actually worse, he's less capable than his child self, where his child self could actually sense Toji, where he couldn't because of the mental nerfs. Sneak attack through his stomach, that as well to start the fight, which I know he reinforces so the wound didn't get worse, but he still had a sword through his stomach. That's true, he couldn't heal it. I mean, he came with one of the only 2 weapons in the world to counter Gojo, specifically in the Anniversary of Heaven. And then he also caught him off guard to stab him in the back, literally when he tricked Gojo into thinking that he went to assassinate Rico, and Gojo's priority was to save Rico, not the actual fight. It's just why I do think Teen Gojo's at least a bit higher than Toji. He's stronger than him, probably like very close, and a lot stronger than people think. So my bad about that. I'll let you take the post-awakened scaling.
Listen, even though Toji went with that plan, there's no disregard to Toji. That's who he is, assassination. That he's a sorcerer killer. But for scaling purposes, everything has put Teen Gojo before awakening to be stronger than Toji, just by portrayal and the whole plan needed to get rid of Gojo. If he was more confident in his ability to get rid of Gojo, then he probably wouldn't have made all those plans, because he thinks he's far stronger. But obviously, the story has entailed us to be something different, and that gives us a good reference for how strong pre-Gojo is. Now, post-Gojo is a whole different animal, and it's not even close. Like, the pre-one makes him look like a child, from just cursed energy buff, because we see when he goes with Geto, after they see Riko's lifeless body. And Geto looks at him, and we see the cursed energy flying up in the panel. He's like, what has happened to you? That just gives us to us from him just unlocking reverse curse technique. He had a usual curse energy buff. Now he has reverse curse technique, like I just said. He has access to now red, and then later on access to purple. But his overall stats has become far, far more dangerous. And if I'm correct, I don't know if this is true or not, did he unlock being able to teleport post-awakening, or do you think he could always do it?
He could always do it, because unless it has to do with reverse curse technique.
My headcanon was, because he didn't use it before, it's just more so he learned more mastery of the technique once he learned reverse curse technique. But this is just headcanon, and I don't know, so I just that's potentially something. But overall stats, Gojo is just so far ahead. I mean, in the rematch, we saw how he was not only just stronger than Toji, he far outclassed him in legit every single stat. From speed, he was getting perception blitzed, he couldn't even counter anything he was doing. The best thing he was doing was using the Chain of Mao with the inverted Spear of Heaven to stop his hits to prevent himself from dying. But even still, Toji didn't hit Gojo once during that whole rematch, just to give you how much stronger Gojo has, even if we say that pre-awakened Gojo is somewhat relative to Toji. So that just gives us a huge inclination into how strong he is. And now, how strong do you think Kenjaku is, and how do you think this clash would go?
So it's really interesting because obviously I'm one of the people who think Toji and Maki are super relative. I've seen people actually say Maki is stronger than Toji just a bit because she's in a physical prime, whereas Toji did say he was rusty, though he could just be referring to his assassination skills. So because of this, because a lot of people do think Maki closely scales to Kenjaku, so it's not like Maki's going to blitz Kenjaku or Kenjaku's going to blitz Maki, though you could argue either or. Honestly, I think Kenjaku would be fast in that case, but for that reason, right, and because I think they're relative to Toji as well, it's kind of like a one-to-one scaling, where awakened Gojo, actually, just a quick thing to point out, a pre-awakened Gojo of less cursed energy, and without all of his buffs, and while he was mentally and physically nerfed to hell, was actually keeping up with Toji in terms of speed, by the way. So Toji did actually try to assassinate Gojo, he just ran straight at him, but even this nerfed Gojo actually reacts to him twice, actually, during the fight. And then he only loses track of him once Toji hides in a building, and then he starts running around. So he just couldn't track him. He could keep up with him in terms of speed the entire fight.
So,
and then obviously,
yeah. Sorry. So more so you're saying that Gojo was able to react to that Toji pre-awakened Gojo, but necessarily when he started moving, he wasn't able to track him to like some nuts.
He could track him, but the issue was, at least if he was looking at him, but the issue was Toji vanished. So if you actually, like, I analyzed some, because I've seen a lot of people say, oh, he just completely lost track of him because Toji blitzed him. Not the case at all, actually, because I had to go back a couple times. What happens is he actually fires off Toji into a building, and then obviously there's smoke, and he's like, oh yeah, he'll come out, but then he sees Toji isn't there once the smoke clears. So then he's like, oh shit. He's like, because he ran through the building, specifically Gojo says that, and he's running around, and Gojo's like, I can't actually track this guy because he can't sense him, not can't see him, right? Because he does, again, react to him a couple times, even enough, but obviously post-awakening, he dodges him point blank, right?
MJ Lee, it's crazy.
Yeah, like he was Kyrie Irving, the balance was something else, right? And then it's very debated on if the next movement was either teleportation or he actually just full-on blitzed him. It probably was teleportation, even though we don't see the hand signs for it.
I just to interject, I was going to say, because we don't see the hand signs, and for every time he's teleported, he does use the hand signs. My assumption is he just got perception blitz. That's just how I saw it. So,
yeah, I actually agree with you, but I've seen a lot of people say it's teleportation. So let's just say it is teleportation. It still doesn't change the fact that he casually, like you said, like Michael, like MJ or Kyrie or I don't know, whoever does that little balance, right? He dodged him casually. And then let's say he activated his teleportation before Toji could swing at him point blank. So it's another blitz, well, I guess an activation blitz, right? Clearly he's leagues above him. So the reason I'm saying all this is because it does in a way apply to Kenjaku depending on where you scale Maki. Because Teen Awakened Gojo scales well above Toji in terms of very stats. Exactly like you said, didn't touch him once, finished the fight very quickly, and also two-shot him, like one red, one hollow purple.
Yep.
So he would do the same to Maki in this case. And unless you think Kenjaku would do the same to Toji, then obviously Awakened Gojo would beat Kenjaku at least base to base.
Yes.
If any of that made sense.
And to tag into that, so basically the summarization is that physical stats, from what we can infer from the feats that they showed, Gojo is much stronger than what feats we've seen from Kenjaku. However, to even add on to what Kaio said, I do believe Kenjaku is doing Maki and Toji in a similar fashion in terms of getting bodied. However, not into the extent that he's perception blitzing them or he's two-shotting them and then the match is over. It would be a little bit more difficult with that just because their stats are a little bit more relative in regards to even base stats of speed or etc. A good example is we can use someone such as Yuki, and obviously Yuki isn't comparable to anybody. But the fact that she was able to blitz Kenjaku and punch him and break his arm shows that she should be somewhat relative to at least the Maki and Toji, whether she's faster, whether she's slower, but at least around that ballpark, which gives us to an idea that Kenjaku is not significantly faster than the Maki and Toji, that he would be able to start blitzing Gojo, or at least keeping up with that version of Gojo. Now, even still with that, we saw Toji being able to at least react in moments with the 1,000 Chain of Miles and the Inverted Spear of Heaven. So that does not count out someone such as Kenjaku, who can react to this Gojo, especially with his utility. And when we talk about his utility, he's the one who taught domain amplification to the disaster curses, which means he definitely has domain amplification, which will allow him to just bypass infinity regularly. We also know he has a domain expansion, which Gojo does not have at this current time. However, we'll get back to the domain expansion point a little later. However, like Kaio said, from base to base, just physical stats, whether that is AP, speed, reactions, even potentially durability, Gojo should be stronger. So, which will give more cadence to him being able to potentially overpower Kenjaku. But now, like I said, there's some things that change the scope of the fight, being domain expansion and domain amplification. So how significant do you think this will be in the clash, Kai?
Well, I think it's going to be pretty significant because obviously Kenjaku is one of the best barrier users we've seen. And domain amplification is definitely going to help in this case to bypass the Limitless. But thankfully, at least in this case, we've seen how Kenjaku would actually react to a fight or a situation like this. Mm-hmm. Let's say when Yuki punched him and he realized, I have no way to beat Yuki, right? And then in this situation, he was like, okay, domain expansion, the very first thing he tried. Yeah. And so I guess in this case, let's say Gojo starts the fight off with a red, right? And then Kenjaku realizes, because he's aware of the six-side Limitless ability, says like, yeah, I'm screwed. I just need to domain shot hit and kill him because he doesn't have a domain himself. And he would, I don't think Kenjaku, if Toji tanked it because it's unclear if the first time Toji gets hit with a red, he actually negated the damage with the Inverted Spear of Heaven, because if a lot of people are very, very confused and actually think, right, falsely think that Toji can just tank reds easily and eat them up, when that's not the case at all. The reason people think this is because Toji says, oh yeah, none of his abilities are a problem, but they actually completely ignore the context in the very same page, or I actually think it was the very previous page, where he says the only reason the red isn't an issue is because I can actually negate most of the damage if I block it with the Inverted Spear of Heaven in time. Again, negating damage. So,
I mean, to
you can debate.
Add on to what you said, it's part of the reason why he attached the Inverted Spear of Heaven to the 1,000 Chain of Miles to give him more range to negate it on contact. For example, when he first bypassed Infinity, as you see, on contact it negates the Infinity. Meaning if he was to use red, it would negate it on hit. And a good example of him doing that is when the simple domain that Gojo used from that Curse Spirit, you see he was using it to destroy all the knives and they were all done on contact. So it's more so of him being able to negate those things because of his curse rules, rather than him actually saying red isn't a big deal because he can tank it. But continue what you're saying. Yeah,
it's interesting because he says it negates most of the damage. So now this brings into question, so the first time he gets hit by the red, did he actually negate it already, the Inverted Spear of Heaven, or did he take that head on? I'm going to be very generous to Toji and say that he didn't take it, like he didn't negate it at all, because he did look to take a lot of damage, right? He's bleeding from his head. Mm-hmm. But just wanted to throw it out there to say that the red is stronger than a lot of people think, because it gets slapped on a lot because they misunderstand, or not even misunderstand, they remove all context of what Toji thought.
And also now, to put this, just to briefly help you with the red, because of the Jogo fight where Gojo was clearly, very, very clearly holding back a lot. a lot of people make an assumption that red isn't of significant damage, which I just think is very disingenuous based on how it's being used. But continue.
Exactly, because you're completely right, because we know you can control the amount of output in your curse techniques. You can literally make it so the red does a tiny, tiny little blast, right, that just punctures a small hole in a wall into maximum output, like just going through an entire city if you really wanted to at this point. So it's just like you said, he's probably controlling the output. Even in his own words, he didn't want to kill Jogo. He wanted information from him. So you're completely right. And just onto the point of, well, what would happen with Kenjaku? I do think it would really mess up Kenjaku if he gets hit by a red just face on. And I don't think he'd be able to dodge it. If Toji couldn't dodge it, and Toji says he can react to it, but he can't dodge it though, right? He has to use the Invert Sphere of Heaven. I don't think Kenjaku's dodging this.
Yes.
But thankfully for Kenjaku, he does have reverse curse technique. So let's say fight starts off with red or blue, gets hit by it, and then he heals himself like he did with Yuki. Casts domain expansion. But of course, the most important point to all of this is how does Gojo actually respond to the domain, right? So,
and I think that is very interesting because we know Kenjaku is #1 smoke dodger. He's not really trying to fight for no reason. So because of this, not only does he have prior knowledge on the Six Eyes trauma that he's had from losing to previous ones, he's a type of calculated person who comes in with the most amount of information before he fights someone. The only real time he didn't was Yuki, and that's why the fight against Yuki was so impressive, because he came in pretty much blind and will still manage to defeat the 3v1 with Tengen and Choso's help. But in this case, he would have the knowledge of them. And like Kaio said, based on the information, he would probably be like, oh shit, the Six Eyes user is pretty serious, let me use my domain expansion. Most likely with the domain expansion, with the information we got with Gojo saying he was working on his domain in his 3rd year, there's a potential that Gojo had no domain, which means he has no domain counters, potentially. Now there is one thing me and Kaio talked about on the potential of him having a simple domain. And even with a simple domain being the fact that he still had to work on his barriers, I do incline that Kenjaku probably just has the strongest domain, and it goes similarly in the manner with Yuki, maybe not as quick, but to the fact that his domain expansion would eventually overpower his simple domain, which would be the biggest win con for Kenjaku to win. But before I go and ask your opinions, one thing is, it could go like a Sukuna version, where Sukuna, or in this case Gojo, is just far outclasses him in stats that he can, well, take him out before the use of a domain expansion. A good example is Sukuna versus Ryu. Sukuna versus Ryu gave us an example that if the stats are so far big, the character can just basically perception blitz or destroy them before they can even pull out a move. And especially with Awakening Gojo scaling being a bit dubious in regards to how close is he between everybody else, how far is he against people such as Utah, how close is he to people such as 15 Finger Sukuna, and the fact that we can only really go from a portrayal of him pretty much negative or no diffing Toji, there is a lack of information to really see how they will work. So I do think one of the biggest win cons for Kenjaku is the domain. But outside of domain, I do believe Gojo will win pretty much every other time. Because even with his intellect and all the other stats, I just believe Gojo's base stats are much closer to a 15-finger Sukuna than they are to a Ryu, Kashima, or someone such as that. What do you think in that regard?
Well, I think I'm about to make a lot of people angry. Ooh. Because, listen, I've already made the Toji fans upset. Listen, I think, one thing I'm going to clarify, I think Toji and Maki and all those guys are very, very, very powerful. Just Gojo's on a different level, okay? I just want to say I made the team Geto fans upset. I'm about to make the Kenjaku fans upset too. Because I actually think Gojo wins this in every way, right? I didn't think this beforehand. Okay. I think I even told you, right? Kenjaku wins if it opened like with a domain expansion. Now that I think about it, I think he just loses anyway.
Why?
Oh god. The reason I say this is because, okay, this is on the assumption that he has a simple domain though. For the simple domain, I think even if he's got like a regular simple domain, because we know each of the 3 big clans, they pass on some sort of domain countermeasure. So we know the Zenin clans specifically have Falling Blossom Motion. Yeah. It's possible that this is given to, it's just what all the 3 big clans use, the Falling Blossom Motion, but it's possible that each clan has like a separate move. So maybe the Gojo clan has something else and this clan has something else. I guess we'll actually find out with chapter 226, right? If Gojo has any form of simple domain, which definitely the big clans do teach everyone, and they're going to teach the head of the clan since Gojo's the head of the clan since he's a kid, if he just keeps it on for a couple seconds, that's more than enough time for him to slaughter Kenjaku. Because we saw in the Yorozu fight of Sukuna, even if you don't open your own domain, even if you don't open a simple domain, if you can just kill the opponent instantly or just as soon as the domain opens, I mean, if you have a couple seconds and you're just that much stronger than them, you pretty much outclass them. So I think, because we both agree that Gojo is just that much stronger base to base, right? I think he's way stronger than Kenjaku.
Yeah, I would agree.
So if he has a couple seconds and he realizes, I gotta kill this man quick, and a couple seconds is being not generous to him at all, because he could be longer because of the 6 eyes. But let's say it'll take like 5 seconds for him to strip. Teleports next to Kenjaku. It just activates whatever ability, like hollow purple, red,
but
blue,
if he was
like everything.
In the domain currently, would he be able to teleport? I'm not sure if that would be possible.
He should be. Yeah, you can still use curse techniques within a domain. All it is a domain bypass. It doesn't negate a curse technique. That domain application, that's something else does. Yeah, it just bypasses the defense that your curse technique has. So Naobito could still use projection, and Nanami and Megami both could still use their curse techniques within a domain. But Megami's is special place since that was a clash.
If I'm correct, never mind. I don't have the thread on my top of my head. But I do remember Lightning was talking about Fallen Blossom not working like a usual simple domain counter. So rather, it's actually not. So the way he described it, if I will check this to be sure. Basically, it's not a domain counter. Rather, it just allows you to fight back in the domain.
Yeah,
if it makes
sense. It's not a simple domain. Yeah,
yes,
basically, because I was confused. I think a couple of months ago, I thought the same. Yeah, because it's not a simple domain, but it's like you think, like you said, actually, it's turning the cursed energy into a countermeasure. So whatever curse technique comes, the cursed energy of yours that shrouded your body actually just counterattacks it.
Yes.
But
exactly,
sometimes I still say sometimes like a simple domain countermeasure. I should just say domain countermeasure, but even if it is something, actually that's even better though, wouldn't it? Because if it really is Falling Blossom Motion or the Gojo's Clan version of that, because it's not a simple domain, Kenjaku wouldn't be able to strip it away.
Incorrect if I'm right, because I do remember in the middle of the domain, Naobito was complaining about his domain is too strong. He feels as if he's getting... I don't remember the exact word he said.
Overwhelmed.
But he was saying, I don't know if it was overwhelmed, but he was complaining that the domain short hit was really strong. So I'm assuming that the short hit effect has a part to play with how much they can actually counter. But that's just like something of an example to give in regards to how we play.
No, but I don't think that has anything to do with stripping away the domain. Because there's no simple domain to strip away. So Kenjaku wouldn't be able to remove the actual cursed energy shrouding Gojo.
But wouldn't he now just then be a target to the short hit if they was actually too strong for them to counterattack? Which was kind of the point.
Yeah, so the thing is, Gojo's cursed energy itself would counterattack. Let's just assume he has a Falling Blossom Motion. That would fire back, so in the same way like the spikes came out of Naobito, and attack the gravity. Then it becomes a question of, can Gojo's... Does the cursed energy surrounding Gojo, is that stronger than Kenjaku's cursed energy?
Yes.
The reason Dagon...
Sorry to cut you off. Is it cursed energy or just the short hit itself?
Sorry?
Would it be the cursed energy or just the short hit itself?
Oh, I guess in this case it would be both, since the sure hit really is your just own cursed technique and cursed energy. Okay. So if you are stronger than someone else, then you'd overpower it. Though of course we know why this couldn't be the case for Dagon, since even though Naobito was absolutely dog-walking like base-to-base Dagon, even though Dagon had more cursed energy, because Dagon had more cursed energy, and once he activates domain expansion, he has just such a massive swarm of death swarm. I didn't even mean to phrase it like that. Yeah, like, because Naobito easily counteracts death swarm in the beginning when it's just the casual version, but then he specifically focuses like 70% of it, and because he has so much more cursed energy than Naobito, which was said, Naobito says in the beginning as well, like Dagon has a monstrous amount, it's so much. Because of that, he just overwhelms him, right? It's just too many for the Falling Blossom Motion to keep up with. He just doesn't have enough cursed energy to shroud himself, or even to counter-react. Whereas in this case with Gojo, obviously, I think we both agree that Awakened Gojo has more cursed energy than Kenjaku. Or maybe not.
It's so hard to say because...
Hard to say, yeah.
Because my assumption is Gojo got more cursed energy as he grew. So, like, I don't think this would be the highest total of cursed energy Gojo has now. So, I'm going to throw Kenjaku a bone and say he has more.
Yeah, if Kenjaku has more cursed energy, then what would probably... In that case, then, let's say in that scenario, it's now because let's just assume again, it's Falling Blossom Motion, which the Gojo clan teaches everyone. It's their prized counter domain measure. Gojo's Falling Blossom Motion would counterattack the gravity, but it wouldn't completely stop it. I think it would, in that case, stop most of it. And Gojo would be hit by it, but it wouldn't be like a massive hit, is the thing.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way when Naobito was getting hit by a ton of the Death Swarms, which wasn't an issue, but the issue was it kept happening. Like for a full minute, thousands, millions of them, maybe not millions, but hundreds and thousands kept hitting him. So that's why that was an issue. So in Gojo's it would be the case where probably the first one he doesn't have an issue with. Kenjaku keeps spamming it. And if Kenjaku, that's the key thing, has more cursed energy than Gojo, then he'd actually be set in that case.
Yeah. And even to just tap into that, because the short hits work differently, like Dagon's is just a continuous swarm of Shikigami, whereas Kenjaku's, from what we've seen, at least the one he used, is like a huge gravity hit. So that even the damage the short hit could do could be different, which could change a lot of the outcome as well. So that is just one thing to consider. But yeah, I think basically you're trying to say whoever has the most cursed energy would win. In my personal opinion, or at least the only win con scenario I have, I do believe Kenjaku wins a domain clash, even if he does have a simple domain. And that is, for me, the only win con Kenjaku has. Because everything else, I just see Gojo bodying him. Whether it's base to base, everything else, just curse techniques. Curse spray manipulation, that's no problem for Gojo. He's wiping all of them. So I just, that's just how I see it.
For me, it's got to be the only scenario Kenjaku wins is if he has more cursed energy than Awakened Gojo, which I don't agree with, but I can't confirm it. So if you disagree, like anyone watching, fair enough, actually. You know, I can't say you're wrong. But if he does have more, probably overwhelms him with his domain expansion, like continuously hitting him with the hit. Gojo might still win in that case, but if Gojo has more cursed energy, whatever like domain countermeasure or simple domain, even if the simple domain lasts for a couple seconds, as we saw the Sukuna fight of Yorozu, I think that would be enough time because there's such a big gap between base to base. And I want to clarify, like, I'm not saying Kenjaku's weak or Toji is weak or Maki, like all these guys.
I think don't lie to them, bro. It's all good.
Toji.
No, I think
perhaps a fraud, but
one thing. Whoa!
I'm joking.
I think a lot of people sleep on how strong Teen Gojo is. So
yeah, that's the thing. Exactly. Yeah,
so
I think Kenjaku's stronger than Yuta, of course. Like, I think he's stronger than Yuki. Beat Yuki. It's just Gojo. Awakened Gojo, even pre-Awakened.
It's Gojo.
So slept on, man. Like you said, just so slept on.
I think because the issue is Gojo now is so far ahead that the concept that even his teenage years is so far ahead of the main cast seems not likely. So I think that's a lot of reason why. But just portrayal. If you're saying Toji, because I know a lot of people rate Toji and Maki highly. If you say he's relative to people like Yuta, Akari, Ryu, Kashima, and we know what Gojo did to Toji, then it just shows the gap between Gojo just awakened between the rest of them. So yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up how I've thought of how the clash will go. I think Kenjaku is super strong, and well, it's just, if they were to fight 100 times, how many times do you got Gojo against Kenjaku? And then that would be the last thing to say.
Awakened Gojo?
Yes.
I would say... Wait, do we say Kenjaku has prep? Like, he knows the information.
Yeah. He has prep.
If he has prep, I think he'd actually win.
Okay. But how many times
he walks into the fight with complete knowledge he's going to fight Gojo and sets things up. But let's just say they run into each other. I think Gojo wins...
Oh, if they run into each other, he wins 90-10. I can't lie to you.
Yeah. That's what I was assuming the entire time. I think if it's like that, I agree. Like 75, 80, 90.
Yeah, because Kenjaku is the real Batman. People say Toji is Batman. It's really Kenjaku. Yeah. If he has a plan...
He seals Gojo.
Yeah, real talk. So I think, if it's with prep, Kenjaku...
Yeah, I think Kenjaku would win way more times if he's like really prepped for the fight.
So if he gets like a Toji time to prep, he wins 60-40.
Oh, it's over. It's actually over, yeah.
Because there's going to still be times where Gojo still wins. But if it's
I'm saying it might even be 100.
You think it's 100? You know what?
I think he's such a smart character. I think there's no way, not even any universe where he loses. If let's say like he's brought all the tools out necessary and he's maybe got some curse techniques for Uzumaki specifically to counter him.
Even curse spirits, he can use that domain to put him in to trap him.
Yeah, he probably gets some crazy plan.
I hear you. Yeah, but if it's a random encounter, Kenjaku, you're again traumatized by another 6 eyes user again. So, yeah, man. But if it helps, his brain will probably survive, so he can switch with Gojo's body, and then Kenjaku wins. So
unless it gets hollow purple.
True.
Yeah.
Hey, hollow purple looking kind of fraudulent now. Everyone was saying it was durability. It was deletion. It was deletion, and
it's Sukuna.
A certain person is walking with just a hand. So that's all I'm saying about it.
It's Sukuna, man. Built 20 things. Sukuna built different.
19 with a head. But yeah, it is what it is. It is what it is.
Yeah.
But yes, thank you guys for watching. Who do you think will win, Kenjaku or Gojo? And obviously, go check out my man Kaio's channel. Thank you again for coming.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Leave a like.